Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today we're examining a disappearance where minutes mattered, a salon, an empty chair, and questions that only became more unsettling over time.
You know, it's fascinating because we engineer our environments to create this illusion of permanence.
Right, we really do.
You sit at your desk or you place your keys in the exact same spot every day. You turn on a microwave and you just operate under this unspoken contract that you'll be there to see the timer hit 0.
Yeah, you assume you're safe inside that little routine.
Exactly. But the architecture of an unguarded moment is incredibly fragile. The most terrifying disruptions, well, they don't announce themselves with cinematic chaos. They slip quietly through the cracks of a totally mundane routine. A few minutes of vulnerability is literally all the universe requires to permanently alter reality.
That's completely terrifying, but so true. And I want you, listening right now, to look at a clock and mentally carve out 13 minutes from your current schedule.
13.
Yeah. Think about the physical space you occupy in 13 minutes. You might answer an email, walk to the kitchen, pour a cup of coffee, and walk back.
The psychological footprint of that time frame is practically 0. It's just a rounding error in a busy workday.
Exactly. And today we are walking through the 2004 disappearance of Patrice Endres to demonstrate how 13 minutes is enough time to effectively erase a human being from the face of the earth.
When you analyze the mechanics of an event constrained to that specific duration, it really forces a complete recalibration of how we view opportunity and intent.
Because there's no margin for error, right?
Right. A 13-minute window leaves no room for hesitation. It requires a terrifyingly precise alignment of variables, whether that's orchestrated by cold premeditation or just, catastrophic coincidence.
And we are going to explore every single variable of that alignment today. We are walking through the incredibly narrow timeline of Thursday, April 15th, 2004.
And we have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We'll evaluate the baffling physical evidence left behind at Tambers, Trim, and Tan. We're going to analyze the known serial killers whose hunting patterns intersected with this region, and we're going to unpack the intense, borderline obsessive internet scrutiny surrounding her family dynamics.
But to understand the void Patrice left behind, we really have to understand the space she occupied first.
Right, let's start there. Let's talk about the victim and the setting.
So the geographical and social context is basically the foundation of this mystery. In 2004, Cumming, Georgia, which is located in Forsyth County, was this community navigating a really specific tension between rural isolation and suburban sprawl.
Yeah, and Highway 369, where the salon is located, is a prime example of that transitional geography.
It absolutely is. It's a high-volume traffic corridor, but it lacks the dense, pedestrian-heavy oversight of, like, a traditional main street. Cars move fast,
People just trying to get from point A to point B.
Right. Drivers are looking forward, and the businesses dotting the highway exist in relative isolation despite the constant flow of vehicles right outside their doors.
Yeah, Patrice Endres was 38 years old. She was a mother and an incredibly popular hairstylist.
She was very well loved in that community.
She really was. And her entire psychological and emotional gravity centered around her teenage son, Pistol Black. Friends, clients, family, they universally describe her dedication to him, not just as a prominent trait, but as the defining characteristic of her existence.
And her professional anchor was her salon, Tambers, Trim, and Tan. This was a standalone building on that busy stretch of Highway 369 we just talked about.
And she owned it, right?
Yes, she did. Her husband, Rob Endres, who was 20 years older than Patrice, had financed the purchase and the extensive remodeling of the space. It was customized to her exact specifications.
It was really her sanctuary.
It was her domain, yeah. A place where she dictated the environment, the clientele, the daily routine.
Which I think makes the sudden violation of that domain so difficult to process.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent hours looking over the crime scene photographs from that afternoon. And the visual language of the salon does not scream violence at all.
No, it doesn't.
It resembles a vacuum seal. It's as if all the oxygen was suddenly sucked out of the room, preserving everything mid-action.
Right.
It's profoundly unsettling because the absence of chaos makes the suddenness of her vanishing feel almost supernatural.
The forensic term for that is an interrupted environment. The evidence doesn't suggest a struggle, It suggests an evaporation.
Evaporation. That's a chilling way to put it.
Well, to understand how that evaporation occurred, we must trace the timeline with forensic rigidity. Thursday, April 15th, 2004 begins as an entirely unremarkable business day.
Right. Customers are in and out all morning. And at 11:37 in the morning, the phone records show Patrice finishing a call with a client.
And we know about her state of mind during that call.
Yeah, the client later reports the conversation was entirely routine. Patrice's tone was light, she was engaged, and there was zero indication of stress, rush, or, an unknown presence in the room.
The baseline at 11:37 is absolute normalcy.
But the deviation from that baseline occurs precisely 13 minutes later.
Right. At 11:50 in the morning, another client dials the salon. The phone rings, but there's no answer. It simply rings out.
Now, for a solo operator running a client-facing business, missing a single call is not inherently a crisis. I mean, a small business owner might be mixing color in the back, stepping into the restroom, or running out to grab a package from a delivery truck.
Exactly. A missed call at 11:50 creates unease, maybe, but it doesn't trigger a 911 dispatch.
The threshold from unease to an active critical incident is crossed at noon. Two of Patrice's regular scheduled clients arrive at the salon. They walk through the front door expecting the familiar routine.
But instead, they step into a completely vacant building.
And the perimeter is established right there, 11:37 to 11:50. That is the 13-minute window.
And the physical environment they find inside is what establishes the interrupted nature of the scene we were talking about.
Right. Let's walk through that evidence, because it's baffling. Patrice's lunch was sitting in the microwave area. The appliance had been run, and the food was still warm. She had not taken a single bite.
More significantly, her purse and her keys remained on the desk. In behavioral analysis, this is known as an anchor indicator.
An anchor indicator.
Yeah, so a person executing a voluntary departure, even an impulsive or distressed one, relies on muscle memory. You grab your keys to operate a vehicle, you grab your purse for resources.
So you're saying she wouldn't just leave those behind?
Right. The presence of these anchor items immediately rules out a spontaneous walkaway. It escalates the scene from a missing persons report to a high probability abduction scenario.
But the scene wasn't completely untouched, which makes it even weirder. Two specific things are missing, and they complicate the narrative immensely. First, the cash register had been opened, and approximately $600 was gone.
And the second item?
Her wedding ring was missing from the scene. And this wasn't a standard, easily pawnable gold band. It was a highly distinct piece of jewelry. Two separate bands soldered together, featuring a marquee diamond center stone.
The introduction of missing cash and jewelry forces investigators to entertain the motive of a robbery.
Sure, that makes sense on the surface.
But applying a robbery model to a midday hair salon on a busy highway presents severe logical friction. A financially motivated offender targeting a small yield business wants speed and anonymity.
Get in and get out.
Exactly. You display a weapon, demand the register contents, and flee. Escalating a $600 robbery into a kidnapping introduces catastrophic risk for the perpetrator.
Right, because abducting an adult requires managing a living, breathing liability who will fight, scream, and attract attention.
It is a wildly disproportionate escalation.
A robber wants the money, not the person. And if they wanted the ring, they force her to take it off, they pocket it, and they run. Taking the victim with them suggests the primary objective was always Patrice, and the theft was either secondary or entirely fabricated.
Which brings us to the anomaly in the parking lot. Her white Chevrolet Tahoe was still on the premises, but its position had been altered.
Yeah, the repositioning of the Tahoe is arguably the most critical piece of physical evidence outside the building. The vehicle was backed into a parking space at an irregular angle.
And we know that wasn't normal for her.
Multiple witnesses, including family members and daily clients, were absolutely adamant that Patrice possessed a rigid routine regarding her vehicle. She never parked in that manner. The positioning was entirely foreign to her established habits.
The implication there is chilling. Someone else was behind the wheel of her car.
We have to consider the tactical advantage of moving that specific vehicle, right? The Tahoe is a large SUV. By backing it in at an angle, could a perpetrator intentionally use the bulk of the vehicle to create a blind spot?
That is the leading tactical theory. A large SUV parked at an angle can effectively eclipse the line of sight from the highway to the front door of the salon. It creates an artificial privacy screen.
Oh, wow. So they're blocking the view from the road.
Precisely. If a perpetrator needed to force Patrice from the building into another vehicle, the repositioned Tahoe shields that critical moment of transfer from passing motorists traveling at 45 miles per hour.
Could someone else have moved it?
Another distinct possibility is that an accomplice moved the vehicle to clear space, or to ensure Patrice could not use it as a barricade or an escape route.
This tactical maneuvering happened in broad daylight, which brings the passing motorists into the equation. Because Highway 369 is a heavy traffic corridor, there were eyes on the building.
Yes, law enforcement secured 2 separate witness accounts from drivers who passed the salon during that specific 13-minute window.
And both witnesses independently corroborated the presence of an unfamiliar vehicle.
They described a blue vehicle, characterized as either a Chevy Lumina or a similar mid-size sedan, parked not in a designated space, but pulled up aggressively close to the front doors of the building.
Aggressively close, like practically touching the building.
Right. This positioning flush against the entrance is an aggressive, temporary posture. It is the vehicular equivalent of holding a door open. It signals an intention to leave immediately.
One of those witnesses provided a human element to the scene, too. As they drove past, they observed 2 individuals standing near the blue car. One was a female with long black hair, matching Patrice's physical description perfectly.
And the other.
The other was a male with shoulder-length hair.
The defining detail of this witness statement is the observed dynamic between the 2 individuals. The witness explicitly stated they appeared to be engaged in conversation.
Right.
There was no flailing, no defensive posturing, no visible distress. To an observer moving at highway speeds, it registered as a benign everyday interaction.
I have a massive issue with the idea of a benign interaction here. If we accept the premise that this is an abduction, the lack of a visible struggle contradicts basic survival instincts.
It absolutely does.
If an unknown male physically attempts to force an adult woman into a vehicle in broad daylight, the natural response is kinetic. You drop your center of gravity, you strike, you vocalize, you fight for your life.
Yes.
If she is not fighting, it implies one of 2 terrifying realities. Either she is complying because the perpetrator is using a sophisticated ruse, or she is complying because he has already established overwhelming lethal control.
The mechanism of compliance is the central psychological puzzle of the abduction phase. If we examine the ruse theory, a perpetrator utilizes social engineering to bypass the victim's threat detection.
Like what kind of ruse?
They ask for directions, they feign a mechanical emergency, they exploit the victim's natural empathy or conditioned politeness. The victim steps outside voluntarily, feeling no immediate threat.
In the lethal control theory.
Lethal control involves the covert application of an immediate threat. A firearm concealed under a jacket and pressed against the ribs, or a knife shown quietly at the waistline.
So she knows she can't run.
Exactly. The perpetrator communicates that any noncompliance will result in instant death. The victim, processing the threat, chooses compliance as a short-term survival strategy, hoping for an opportunity to escape later.
So to a car passing by, a woman standing perfectly still because a gun is against her spine looks identical to a woman standing still having a polite conversation.
Yes, the optics are identical.
So investigators are left staring at this 13-minute void, armed with nothing but the description of a blue Lumina and a shoulder-length haircut. What follows is a massive mobilization.
They threw everything at it.
Forsyth County law enforcement, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, search dogs, community volunteers, they execute grid searches of the surrounding terrain. But days bleed into weeks, and weeks turn into months. The momentum of the investigation hits a wall.
The transition from an active rescue operation to a long-term recovery mission is a grueling psychological shift for a community. It requires accepting that the objective is no longer saving a life, but locating evidence of a death.
And that agonizing stasis lasted for nearly 600 days.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah. On December 6, 2005, the physical search reached its tragic conclusion. Patrice's remains were discovered deep in Dawson Forest, situated in Dawson County.
That location is roughly 11 miles from Tambor's Trim and Tam.
11 miles might not sound far, but geographically and practically, it is an entirely different world from the bustling highway.
It really is. Dawson Forest is a sprawling, densely wooded tract of land with a complex topography. It has a history of being utilized by offenders because its sheer size and ruggedness provide deep concealment.
Right.
But the passage of nearly 2 years in a harsh, humid Georgia environment introduces the science of taphonomy, the study of how organisms decay over time.
When you leave, remains exposed to the elements, the wildlife, the seasonal temperature fluctuations, and the acidic soil of a forest for 600 days, nature acts as a forensic eraser.
That's a good way to describe it.
Investigators did not find a pristine crime scene. They found skeletal remains, and that biological reality severely handicaps the medical examiner.
Forensic anthropology can deduce incredible details from bone, but it has rigid limitations. Without soft tissue, a pathologist cannot determine if the victim suffered lacerations, gunshot wounds that passed cleanly through muscle, or asphyxiation.
Because the evidence is just gone.
Right. The hyoid bone, a delicate structure in the neck, often fractured during manual strangulation, can be scattered by scavengers or decay naturally. Without organs, toxicological analysis to check for sedatives or poisons is impossible.
So they couldn't find anything on the skeleton itself.
Because the skeleton showed no obvious perimortem trauma like a bullet hole in the skull or deep blade scores on the ribs, the official cause of death could not be determined.
The void of the 13 minutes is compounded by the void of the forensic evidence. Law enforcement has the origin point, the empty salon, and the terminus, the forest floor. But the connective tissue, the sequence of events, and the identity of the perpetrator remains entirely obscured.
And when official channels hit an insurmountable wall, nature abhors a vacuum. The sheer lack of answers acts as a magnet for public speculation.
And this leads us to the internet. The democratization of true crime through internet forums, podcasts, and social media creates a massive, decentralized intelligence network.
Thousands of individuals analyze timelines, dissect police statements, and cross-reference geographical data.
It is an extraordinary phenomenon, but it is heavily susceptible to confirmation bias.
Heavily. A community will organically generate a hypothesis, and subsequently all incoming data is forced through the filter of that specific narrative.
We are going to explore the primary narratives constructed by this decentralized network, but I want to explicitly emphasize to you, the listener, that we are engaging in an impartial analysis of public discourse and cultural interpretation.
We are examining the architecture of internet theories.
Right. We are absolutely not endorsing legal accusations against any uncharged individuals. We are looking at how the public attempts to solve the unsolvable.
The most prominent external theory focuses on stranger abduction, specifically the presence of serial predators.
Which makes sense given the location.
Yes. The geographical profile of Dawson Forest and the opportunistic nature of a roadside abduction inevitably draw attention to known offenders operating in the region. The first individual to dominate this discourse was Jeremy Jones.
Jeremy Jones fits a very specific, highly chaotic criminal profile. He was a transient, a heavy methamphetamine user, and eventually a convicted serial killer.
But what elevates Jones from a statistical possibility to a primary focus of internet sleuths is his own mouth. He explicitly confessed to kidnapping and murdering a hairdresser in Forsyth County.
A confession is a powerful piece of evidence, but investigators approach serial confessors with profound skepticism. What made Jones's statement compelling was his inclusion of what investigators term guilty knowledge.
This refers to details of a crime that have been intentionally withheld from the media, or details that perfectly align with undisclosed evidence.
Right, and Jones claimed he targeted the salon and utilized a specific social engineering tactic. He asked the victim for a jump start for his vehicle.
The mechanics of the jumpstart ruse are terrifyingly aligned with the physical evidence. If an individual walks into your business and asks for help jumping their battery, you naturally step outside.
You walk over to their vehicle, which aligns with the witness seeing the blue car pulled flush against the doors.
You might even realize your own car needs to be moved to provide the jump.
Which perfectly explains why Patrice's Tahoe was repositioned and backed in at an odd angle. And you would likely be seen standing next to their car having a calm conversation about jumper cables.
The narrative cohesion is startling. However, the psychology of a methamphetamine-addicted serial confessor is incredibly volatile. Jones eventually recanted his confession.
He took it back.
Yes. More critically, His narrative contained a massive, unresolvable geographical discrepancy. He explicitly claimed he disposed of the victim's remains in Sweetwater Creek. As the forensic recovery proved, the remains were located 11 miles away, deep in Dawson Forest.
This forces us to analyze the motive behind a false confession. If he didn't do it, why claim he did?
Some serial offenders suffer from grandiosity. They want to inflate their terrifying mythology by claiming credit for high-profile unsolved cases they merely saw on the evening news.
And the drugs probably played a part.
Alternatively, chronic, severe methamphetamine abuse induces profound paranoia and memory fragmentation. It is entirely possible Jones committed multiple atrocities and genuinely confused the victims, the locations, and his own methodologies.
But the physical evidence just wasn't there. Law enforcement could not find a single microscopic fiber or drop of DNA linking him to the Salon, leaving his confession stranded in a sea of doubt.
The second serial offender, heavily scrutinized by the online community, is Gary Michael Hilton.
Gary Michael Hilton. He's a very different type of offender.
Hilton operates under a drastically different psychological profile than Jones. He is infamous as the National Forest Memorial Killer. Hilton's modus operandi involved hunting victims in wooded recreational areas.
He was highly active in the specific region of northern Georgia during the spring of 2004, right?
Yes, and he lacked any verifiable alibi for the time frame of the abduction.
Hilton's behavioral patterns also present chilling overlaps. He was known to frequent transitional roadside businesses, including hair salons, specifically during midday hours, to ask patrons or owners for money.
It establishes a pattern of targeting isolated females in commercial environments.
Furthermore, Hilton utilized Dawson Forest as a dumping ground for at least one of his confirmed victims.
The geographic intersection is profound. Dawson Forest is not a localized park. It is a vast tract of land. The fact that a known serial predator utilized the exact same wilderness expanse to conceal a body elevates Hilton to a prime suspect in the public consciousness.
It's hard to ignore that connection.
Yet, similar to Jones, the physical tether connecting Hilton to Tambor's Trim and Tan on April 15th remains undiscovered. The serial killer hypothesis offers a clean narrative of random, monstrous opportunity, but it lacks the forensic anchor to secure a conviction.
And when the random monster theory fails to yield an arrest, public scrutiny inevitably turns inward. It looks at the inner circle.
It always does.
In true crime discourse, the husband is statistically and historically the first lens through which an investigation is viewed. In this case, the internet's fixation crystallized entirely on Patrice's husband, Rob Endres.
To objectively dissect the internet's intense scrutiny of Rob Endres, we must separate the documented investigative reality from the cultural phenomenon generated by media exposure.
Let's begin with the investigative reality. Law enforcement scrutinized Rob immediately, as is standard protocol.
However, he was formally cleared as a suspect because he provided an ironclad, documented alibi for the precise 13-minute window.
The mechanics of an alibi in 2004 are crucial here. We aren't talking about smartphone GPS tracking. Rob provided a time-stamped credit card receipt for a gasoline purchase, alongside employment work logs,
placing him in a different city, miles away from the Salon, exactly when the phone calls went unanswered.
For detectives operating against a razor-thin timeline, physical documentation proving a suspect was geographically removed from the crime scene is a definitive roadblock.
But the online sleuthing community operates outside the bounds of evidentiary rules. They analyzed Rob's biography and discovered a detail that functioned like an accelerant on a fire.
What was it?
Rob Endres holds a degree in criminology.
Yes. In the court of public opinion, that academic credential was not viewed as a neutral fact. It was weaponized as proof of capability.
The online forums hypothesized that a man formally educated in the mechanics of criminal investigations understands the system's vulnerabilities.
Right. The theory posits that he would know the statistical likelihood of the spouse being the primary target of police pressure, and therefore he would understand that fabricating an impenetrable alibi is the only method of survival.
The internet theorized complex logistical workarounds. Could he have surrendered his credit card to a trusted proxy, instructing them to purchase gasoline at a specific minute to generate the time-stamped receipt while he was physically present at the Salon?
Wow, that's elaborate.
Or could he have orchestrated the missing cash to artificially inject the robbery motive, intentionally muddying the investigative waters.
Executing a proxy alibi and staging a scene within a 13-minute window requires an astronomical level of tree meditation and flawless execution. It is a very cinematic theory. But the true catalyst for the public's enduring fixation on Rob wasn't the mechanics of his alibi. It was the optics of his behavior in the aftermath, specifically surrounding the house.
According to widespread reporting, Rob Endres altered the locks on the residence he shared with Patrice within 24 hours of her vanishing.
Just 24 hours.
From a purely logistical standpoint, some might argue securing a property is a protective measure. But from a behavioral and emotional standpoint, the public interpreted this action as a glaring anomaly.
The psychological argument is that a husband paralyzed by the unknown disappearance of his wife leaves the porch light on. He leaves the door unlocked, desperately hoping she walks back through it.
Right.
Changing the hardware on the doors within a single day signals, to an outside observer, a definitive conclusion that the occupant is never returning. It projects an air of finality that feels utterly incongruent with the initial stages of a missing persons case.
The collateral damage of that action severely intensified the public backlash. Changing the locks effectively barred Patrice's teenage son, Pistol, from accessing his own home and his mother's belongings.
And the relationship was already strained, right?
Yes, the relationship between Rob and his stepson was heavily documented as antagonistic. But the immediate displacement of a traumatized teenager struck a visceral chord with the public. It painted a portrait of a man prioritizing control over compassion.
But the apex of the cultural phenomenon surrounding this case occurred in 2020 with the release of the Unsolved Mysteries reboot. Rob Endres participated in extensive on-camera interviews.
And the resulting footage triggered a tidal wave of amateur behavioral analysis.
The way he articulated his grief, his phrasing, his recounting of events, it profoundly disturbed the viewing audience.
The specific details he volunteered on camera were highly unconventional. He openly discussed the protocol following the recovery of Patrice's skeletal remains.
Yeah, this part was shocking to people.
He stated he instructed the funeral director to reassemble the bones on a table, allowing him to visually process her entirely. He spoke of physically handling her skull, carrying it around the facility.
He went further, detailing his daily interactions with her cremated remains. He admitted to sleeping with her ashes, contained within a cardboard box, and referred to the remains using the diminutive term teddy bear.
Furthermore, he expressed an absolute possessive refusal to share any portion of those ashes with Pistol, claiming sole ownership of her memory.
When that footage aired, the internet essentially functioned as a decentralized jury, delivering a conviction based entirely on behavioral optics.
The digital consensus analyzed his dialogue and diagnosed a hyper-possessive pathology.
The overarching theory evolved. If Patrice was contemplating ending the marriage, which some friends and her son suggested she harbored, a severely possessive individual might adopt an extreme, annihilatory mindset. The "if I cannot possess her, no one will" paradigm.
Right.
I have to interject here because this is where the true crime genre often loses its structural integrity. We watch a highly edited television interview, we observe a man speaking bluntly about handling a skull, and our brain's pattern recognition software immediately categorizes him as a threat.
It's an automatic response for a lot of people.
But we have to dissect the actual science of behavioral analysis versus armchair psychology.
This is a critical distinction. The reliance on behavioral analysis in the public sphere is fraught with peril, particularly when forensic evidence is absent. When people cannot analyze a fingerprint, they analyze a facial twitch. They analyze word choice. But bizarre behavior, displaying extreme possessiveness over remains, or exhibiting a flat clinical effect on television, does not fulfill the legal definition of homicide.
Exactly. Grief is not a monolithic, sanitized process that perfectly aligns with the greeting card. Profound trauma shatters the human psyche.
It does.
It can manifest in ways that appear deeply eccentric, intensely selfish, or clinically cold to a neurotypical observer. Someone processing the violent, unresolved loss of a spouse might cling to their physical remains with a ferocity that looks like sociopathy to a viewer sitting on their couch, but is entirely rooted in shattered attachment.
The camera is a distorting lens. It strips context and amplifies eccentricity. An internet tribunal requires no burden of proof. It requires only consensus.
And the legal system requires a lot more than that.
The legal system requires physical evidence, means, and opportunity. While Rob's televised demeanor generated thousands of hours of speculative content, it does not dismantle the physical reality of the 13-minute window, nor does it invalidate the time-stamped alibi that legally cleared him.
Let's pivot back to the physical reality of the crime scene, because that is where the truth actually resides. Let's analyze the lack of a visible struggle in front of the salon.
Okay, let's look at that.
Does the appearance of a calm conversation point more toward a stranger utilizing a sophisticated ruse? Or does it overwhelmingly suggest she was interacting with someone she already knew and trusted?
It is the fulcrum upon which the entire profile balances. If we look at the known entity theory, compliance is intrinsic. If an acquaintance, a former client, or a family member pulls up in a blue vehicle, she steps outside without hesitation.
Because she knows them.
Her guard is completely down. The interaction is genuine until the trap is sprung, likely once she is already inside the vehicle.
But the stranger ruse is equally potent. If a transient individual, like Jeremy Jones, leverages the jumpstart request, he is hacking her social conditioning.
Humans are fundamentally wired to assist when low-stakes help is requested.
She complies not out of trust, but out of social obligation, completely unaware that a lethal threat is imminent. Both scenarios perfectly explain the witness observing a calm interaction.
Which forces us to confront the inherent contradiction of the 13-minute window. It is simultaneously the greatest clue and the greatest hindrance.
How so?
It drastically narrows the suspect pool by eliminating anyone who cannot account for that precise block of time. But conversely, it demands an almost supernatural level of logistical choreography from the perpetrator.
Let's break down the logistics of what must occur within those 780 seconds. The perpetrator must pull off the highway, approach the business, and initiate contact.
They must deploy their ruse or their weapon to gain absolute compliance.
They must secure Patrice inside their vehicle. They must then re-enter the salon, navigate to the register, extract the cash, and remove her unique wedding ring.
They must exit the building, enter Patrice's Tahoe, reposition it at an awkward angle to create a visual shield, exit the Tahoe, return to their own vehicle, and merge seamlessly back into highway traffic.
All without a single passing motorist observing distress or violence.
When you outline the required actions sequentially, the concept of a random crime of opportunity begins to buckle under its own weight.
It's just too much.
It requires a drifter, acting on impulse, to execute a flawless multi-stage tactical operation in broad daylight without leaving a single fingerprint, hair follicle, or witness to the actual violence. It suggests a level of luck that defies statistical probability.
Which introduces the darkest hypothesis of all. If the choreography is too perfect for a random drifter, it suggests premeditation. It suggests a targeted hit.
Yes.
If we evaluate the physical anomalies through the lens of a contracted professional, the entire scene snaps into terrifying focus.
A murder-for-hire scenario neutralizes nearly every investigative hurdle. It explains how an individual with a motive could possess a flawless, documented alibi miles away while the crime occurs.
Because they aren't the ones pulling the trigger.
Exactly. A professional hitman utilizes a ruse to ensure a quiet, compliant extraction, avoiding the chaos of a struggle. The missing cash is easily explained. It is either a small supplementary payment taken by the contractor or a deliberate staging tactic designed to force detectives down the blind alley of a robbery gone wrong.
And the ring. The soldered marquee diamond ring. The hitman doesn't steal that to pawn it. A pawn shop would flag a custom piece instantly.
A professional takes that ring as a trophy, or more likely as tangible proof of execution to present to the individual who financed the hit.
The targeted hit theory synthesizes the evidence brilliantly. But it remains a theory because the foundational proof is locked away. And part of the reason it remains locked away is due to the strategic silence of law enforcement. The tactic of guilty knowledge is a double-edged sword.
We talked about how police use guilty knowledge to filter false confessions, like with Jeremy Jones. They withhold the specifics of the crime scene, perhaps the exact position of the keys, the specific denominations of the missing cash, or forensic markers found on the bones, so they can test a suspect's intimate knowledge of the event.
It is a vital mechanism for preserving the integrity of a potential prosecution. If you release all the data, you contaminate the jury pool, and you hand a roadmap to false confessors.
But the collateral consequence of withholding that information is the creation of an informational vacuum.
Right. It forces the public to construct theories utilizing incomplete data sets. The internet builds massive, elaborate structures on foundations of missing puzzle pieces, often leading to innocent people being subjected to relentless digital harassment.
The digital harassment, the endless theorizing, the television specials, they generate an immense amount of noise.
But beneath that noise is an enduring, static tragedy. When I look at why the disappearance of Patrice Endres continues to captivate and devastate people decades later, it is the sheer brutality of the unresolved trauma. You look at Pistol Black. He was the center of his mother's universe.
And in the span of an afternoon, everything changed.
Because of an unknown sequence of events and a changed lock on a door, he didn't just lose his mother. He lost his physical home, his sanctuary, and a tangible connection to her everyday life.
An unsolved homicide is not an event that concludes. It is a permanent state of suspension. The grief cannot metabolize because the narrative lacks an ending.
Yeah.
The family, the investigators, and the community are effectively trapped, endlessly looping through those missing 13 minutes, searching for a ghost in the timeline.
It is the ultimate nightmare of the mundane. The idea that she just stepped out of the flow of her own life, the door clicked shut behind her, and she vanished into the Georgia woods.
But before we close this file, we must apply one final analytical stress test to the foundation of this entire investigation. We have treated the timeline, the window from the 11:37 completed call to the 11:50 missed call, as absolute immutable truth. We built our entire spatial and psychological profile around the assumption that the abduction occurred between those two data points.
The phone records dictate that reality.
Yeah.
She answered the first, she missed the second. The math is rigid. What is the alternative?
The alternative requires us to view the timeline not as a boundary, but as a manipulation. We assume Patrice did not answer the 11:50 call because she was already gone, or because she was actively fighting for her life in the parking lot.
Right.
But what if the 13-minute window is an illusion created by the perpetrator's control over the environment?
Explain the mechanics of that. How would that work?
Consider a scenario where the perpetrator arrived shortly after the first call. They enter the salon, perhaps posing as a walk-in client or utilizing a ruse that keeps them inside the building. The interaction is calm. The environment is stable. Then, at 11:50, the phone begins to ring. In a normal circumstance, Patrice would excuse herself and answer it. But in this scenario, the perpetrator exerts control at that precise moment. They physically prevent her from lifting the receiver.
That fundamentally rewrites the entire sequence. You were suggesting the abduction wasn't a frantic, adrenaline-fueled snatch and grab, violently compressed into 13 minutes. You were suggesting it was a slow burn, unfolding quietly inside the building.
Precisely. If the perpetrator was already inside, controlling her movements when the phone rang, the timeline stretches indefinitely. The missed call is not the end of the abduction. It is merely the moment the perpetrator established dominance over her communication.
So it could have been in there for a long time.
It means the abduction did not happen in a frantic blur. It happened systematically right under the noses of the passing traffic on Highway 369. It was a predator operating in plain sight, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while a phone echoed through a hostage environment.
That is a staggering paradigm shift. It means the danger wasn't a lightning strike in a 13-minute gap. It was a shadow slowly expanding to fill the room, sealing the exits before she even realized she was trapped.
It changes everything.
We began this examination by talking about the illusion of safety, the paused movie frame, the warm lunch, the keys untouched on the desk, the car angled to hide a horrific truth. It all serves as a monument to how a few missing minutes, or the illusion of them, changed countless lives forever.
And left an empty chair in a bustling salon.
In a community, a son, eternally haunted by the unknown. Thank you so much for joining us on this investigation today.
The pursuit of truth in a landscape defined by shadows requires us to continuously dismantle our assumptions, even when the answers remain buried deep within the forest.
Next time, we examine the case of Karina Holmer, a night out in Boston that ended with a discovery so disturbing that investigators were left searching for answers for decades.